Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
In 1968, Johnny Cash played for 2,000 inmates at California's Folsom State Prison. The live recording of that show has become a classic, but the best stories from that day aren't on the album. In the 1960s, Johnny Cash was at a low point in both his professional and personal life. He'd become addicted to pills and earned a reputation for not showing up to gigs. When he did make it to the venue, he was often wasted and delivered subpar performances.
I was drinking a case of beer a day and take it up to 100 pills, half amphetamines and half barbiturates.
Add to that the fact that it had been a couple of years since Cash had a big hit. Cash's bassist Marshall Grant explained why to Rolling Stone, saying, "We couldn't get him in the studio, and when we got him in the studio, he'd come completely unprepared. He came in and would start writing songs. You can't do that. You had to get the songs, work it up, have it ready to go. Well, we couldn't get him to do that." To get something, anything, on vinyl for public consumption, Cash's band floated the idea of recording a live album at California's Folsom State Prison.
Sometimes when you're staging a comeback, you have to go to the most unobvious place and blow it up in the most unobvious way.
It wouldn't be the first or the last time Cash played behind bars. In an interview with NPR, his drummer W.S. Fluke Holland revealed one thing he liked about playing prisons: if he did something the audience didn't like, they couldn't leave. Cash and his band were already scheduled to play a show at Folsom in January 1968, but the album idea was new. Holland wasn't sold on the idea. He didn't think the public would appreciate it and said so. He admitted, "It won't sell enough to pay for tape. I remember saying that 2 or 3 times. In fact, I remember saying it to Bob Johnston, who produced the thing." The concert was actually kind of a perfect idea. Back in 1955, Cash scored one of his earliest top 5 country hits with Folsom Prison Blues. Told in the first person, the song is the story of a man locked up at Folsom who expresses his regret and desire for freedom when he hears the passing train's whistle. The song also includes the iconic Cash lyric, "I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die." Cash had never been in prison. He was inspired to write the song after watching the documentary Inside the Walls of Folsom Prison in the early 1950s.
Prison's a prison. That's all it is.
When Cash and his band arrived at Folsom, located in the town of Represa in Northern California, they were immediately moved by the bleakness of the place. Speaking with Rolling Stone, the renowned music photographer Jim Marshall, who went inside with the band to document the concert, explained, "I think John believed he was just making the public more aware of the conditions in the prisons. I think he saw himself as an entertainer who could make a difference in their lives, even for an hour."
He sang for those who needed something to believe in and needed to be lifted up.
After leaving their motel, Cash and crew were taken to Folsom in a secure prison bus. They drove through granite walls and 2 sets of metal gates. Grant, the bass player, described the feeling, recalling, "When we got to Folsom, it was so quiet and so desolate. There's just no joy here. The atmosphere in there is unlike any place you've ever been in your entire life." Everything they did was watched closely by the guards. Grant remembered, "It didn't mean that the prison guards weren't nice about it, but they had rules and regulations that we had to abide by, and we weren't going to break those rules." There were plenty of rules in the prison, and despite what Grant said, Cash and his band broke at least a few of them. Marshall was actually on probation when he went to Folsom to shoot the concert.
A year before, I was arrested for shooting somebody. I could have been there.
Of course, it's not illegal to go into prison when you're on probation, but when he did, Marshall was violating his probation, prison rules, and the law. He says it was an accident, claiming, "I had a couple of little balls of hash in my camera bag that I forgot about, and they didn't find it, obviously." But can you imagine going into a prison with some drugs on you? The guards weren't completely oblivious, though. Marshall was stopped for wearing jeans. Folsom inmates wore jeans at that time, so someone had to quickly scrounge up a pair of brown pants for Marshall to wear. Grant also inadvertently broke the rules in a major way. He recalled, "I carried this gun into Folsom, which was a real gun that we used as part of a gag on stage. You pulled the trigger and it would smoke. I carried it in my bass case. I didn't think anything about it." The guards didn't find it, thank goodness, but when Grant was getting ready to take the stage, he nervously approached the guard and wisely surrendered the weapon. Cash actually played 2 concerts at Folsom on the same day. Because the shows were being recorded, the second show was basically a safety measure in case something went wrong in the first set. Ultimately, all but 2 songs on the LP were recorded during the first concert. At Folsom Prison is heavily edited, so it doesn't give listeners a complete account of what the concerts were really like. For example, Cash and his band weren't the only artists on the bill. First to take the stage was an early rock and roll star and one-time member of Cash's band, Carl Perkins, who played his signature song, Blue Suede Shoes. Then the Statler Brothers vocal group went on, singing Flowers on the Wall and This Old House. Only then did Cash take the stage, joined on a couple of numbers by his future spouse, June Carter, without the rest of her group, the Carter family. Grant explained, "We felt it wasn't the place to take the entire family, but John wanted June, and we felt that we could look out after her ourselves, along with the prison guards. One female is easy to look out after, where 4 or 5 women could have been a problem, and that's the reason the Carters weren't on it." It's no surprise that a maximum security prison wasn't set up to handle a full-scale country music concert. Fluke Holland, the drummer, reminisced, "That was the days when we didn't have monitors on the stage. All they had was this house system." In fact, the sound quality was so poor that the band struggled to figure out what was going on. He recalled, "When we got through with the song and went to the next song that John would start to do, we had no idea what it was going to be. So he'd start singing the song and we couldn't hear. We'd just start playing something. We didn't know if we was doing the right thing or whatever, but everything worked out really good." Those shows were the first ever live recording of a prison concert, and as such, the production crew needed some help from the audience. Los Angeles disc jockey Hugh Cherry was the MC, and he told the crowd exactly how he wanted them to behave. Most importantly, they were instructed to remain silent when Cash walked up to the microphone and then to go wild when the singer spoke.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
They thought it would sound good on the record, and it did. Cash opened both Folsom shows with Folsom Prison Blues, but that wasn't the only song about Folsom he played that day. He finished off both sets with Greystone Chapel, a stark poetic tune about finding spiritual comfort while serving time. Before the song, Cash announced, "This next song was written by a man right here in Folsom Prison, and last night was the first time I've ever sung this song. Anyway, this song was written by our friend Glenn Shirley." Shirley, who was sitting in the front row, was completely surprised. He was serving a life sentence for armed robbery and had been persuaded by the prison DJ to write a song in Cash's style. The DJ passed a recording of Shirley's Greystone Chapel to the prison chaplain, Floyd Gressett. Gressett was actually friends with Cash, who was a parishioner at his church in Ventura, California. When Cash was rehearsing in his Sacramento hotel room the night before the Folsom shows, Gressett gave Cash the tape, and Cash and the band learned it that night. Cash befriended Shirley, and with the aid of some powerful friends, Reverend Billy Graham and California Governor Ronald Reagan, he got Shirley transferred to a minimum security facility. While there, he recorded a self-titled live album. Cash helped him with post-production and backing musicians.
You've been a great inspiration to a lot of people, but none more than me.
In 1971, Shirley was paroled and Cash actually met him at the prison gates. Finally, Cash hired Shirley to tour with his band, but when he began to make threats to his bandmates, Cash had to fire him.
That freedom, that overwhelming freedom, weighed on him.
Glenn Shirley took his own life in 1978. The Folsom concerts are Cash's most famous prison shows thanks to the live album, but it wasn't the first time Cash played a penitentiary. On January 1st, 1958, Cash was part of a 7-hour live show at San Quentin. Eventually, he played at least 30 prison concerts over the course of his long career. About a year after the Folsom shows, Cash recorded another live album, this time at San Quentin. At San Quentin hit record stores in 1969. One of Cash's last prison concerts was at the Correctional Training Facility in Soledad, California in 1980.
If somebody says, "I'm not my brother's keeper," he's wrong, because he is. He is his brother's keeper.
By then, Cash had expended an enormous amount of effort and energy on raising awareness of prison conditions and advocating for prison reform.
People have got to become conscious of the problems in the prison.
Speaking to the U.S. Senate Subcommittee on National Penitentiaries in 1972, Cash said, "I've seen and heard of things at some of the concerts that would chill the blood of the average citizen. But I think possibly the blood of the average citizen needs to be chilled in order for public apathy and conviction to come about. Because right now we have 1972 problems and 1872 jails. People have got to care in order for prison reform to come about." One of the original bad boys of the outlaw country movement, Merle Haggard, had trouble staying on the right side of the law at one point. After spending 9 months in California's Ventura County Jail for stealing a car, he tried to rob a Bakersfield restaurant in 1957. Haggard was caught, escaped the city jail, recaptured, and sentenced to up to 15 years at San Quentin. He was released after 3 years for good behavior. But Haggard was an inmate, sitting in the audience when Cash played San Quentin on New Year's Day, 1958.
He'd been over in San Francisco having a party the night before, and he'd sung or talked his voice completely off.
Haggard remembered how Cash asked a gun-chewing guard for a glass of water in front of 5,000 men.
And he mocked that guard. Well, he won the whole audience.
Even if Cash's voice wasn't as powerful as it could have been, it still got a number of prisoners interested in music.
When Cash left, there was guys all over that yard with guitars.
After Haggard showed some of the younger inmates how to play the intro to Folsom Prison Blues, he rose up the prison food chain. Today, Folsom Prison is old and decayed, and it's no wonder. It's California's second oldest prison, opened in 1880 to ease crowding at San Quentin State Prison. As of 2025, Folsom houses about 2,700 inmates, or 109% of its capacity, compared to the approximately 2,000 that attended Cash's show in 1968. But Folsom isn't as harsh as it once was. Built as one of the earliest maximum security prisons in the United States, Folsom has been converted into a medium security institution with a minimum security wing.